If you had to wait for 11 years to be with me, would you wait 11 years? If we had an 11-year courtship, would you wait for me?
Yeah, but why?
We can't be together. We're in Regency times.
Oh.
Would you wait for me? That took too long. Welcome back to Regency Rumors. I'm Kayla, and here on my channel I explore period dramas, history, and historical fiction, and today we're diving into the life of a woman named Katherine Bishop, who had a lot of similarities to Jane Austen's Anne Eliot in Persuasion. No, Jane Austen did not base her characters around a true story. However, a book I recently bought details these really interesting similarities between Anne Eliot's story and Katherine Bishop's life, and today we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into this book. The 1-year anniversary of the 2022 Persuasion just came up this past month, and there's a lot of feelings around that film. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some are saying it's a fresh new take on an Austen classic, others are saying that the jokes didn't land well and it's a really altered version of Jane Austen's original character, and this blend with the modern and historical was clunky and forced. I'll be honest and say I wasn't a big fan of it, and my husband Jordan, who co-makes videos with me occasionally on this channel, and I have done a separate reaction video to that 2022 version. He doesn't have a lot of the emotional attachments that I do to Persuasion, so he was able to offer a more well-rounded, objective view, which I really appreciated. If you'd like to check out that video, which is entitled "A Jane Austen Newbie Watches That Version of Persuasion," then check it out in the show notes. As Persuasion is my favorite book, I got really interested in some of the historical aspects of the book, such as the stairs that Louisa falls down in Lyme, which are still there today and people go and visit, what life was like in Bath, Jane Austen's perspective of Bath and its bizarre medical purposes. Also check out the video that I've done on that. And the barriers for couples in different social classes, such as Anne Eliot coming from an aristocratic family and Captain Wentworth being in the Navy. You know, when you buy impulse books and you're like, wow, this seems like such an interesting book to read. I'm totally going to be a bit more scholarly and I'm going to read a nonfiction true story for a bit and put down the Bridgerton series for a while. And then the book goes on a shelf for a really long time and you never end up reading it and you may never read it. Does that happen to anyone else? No? Well, I am proud to say that I actually picked up that kind of book to read the other day. Yay for breaking cycles. And that book is The Real Persuasion, Portrait of a Real-Life Jane Austen Heroine by Peter James Bowman. I don't know if you guys can see that here. This historian is claiming that there was a real-life Anne Eliot named Katherine Bishop who was in love with a young naval officer who her parents forbade her from marrying. Katherine Bishop had an 11-year courtship with a naval officer by the name of George Peachel or Petchel. I can't remember which one. She was the daughter of an old Sussex family who refused to let her marry Peachel because of his reduced circumstances. A lot of parallels to Anne Eliot's life in this, such as their long courtship. Catherine's sister, Harriet, was also known as a long-form hypochondriac, and Harriet was only able to marry Peachel once he had become rich because of his military career and his inheritance. So Peter James Bowman draws parallels from Katherine and Anne's life based on letters and a journal that Katherine kept, as well as archival material related to Katherine's life. Vice Admiral Sir George Richard Brooke Peachel, 4th Baronet, lived from the 30th of June, 1789 to the 29th of June, 1860. So Peachel entered the Navy in 1803 at the age of 14 and attained the rank of captain in 1826. The book has really good examples of everyday life in the Regency era. There are journal entries and letters that talk about the new cotton and silk gowns that Katherine has bought, the concerts that she goes to, the politicians trends of the time that people are annoyed at, church services that she attends, and her hobbies such as geology. She was really into studying rocks. Katherine writes to her sister and says she went to 3 Latin speeches of about half an hour length each, 1 long English sermon about the arts, and last of all, a most delightful poem spoken and composed by Mr. Chinnery. The subject was the dying gladiator. Katherine's journal shows just how much so many were close to death in this time period. Her brother went and fought in Canada during the War of 1812 and lost his life. She talks about someone else simply dying from a fever. She has ailments in her eyes that could be serious, but what could the doctors back then do about stuff like that in those days? So it was really interesting reading her account of the medical ailments that people had at the time, but them not really knowing what to do about it. So George Peachel's parents were friends of Katherine's parents, and the families had spent time together in Paris. Bowman's unsure when Katherine began having feelings for George, as their families were just friends for a while, but George did start to fill the pages of her diary more and more as time went on. So though the two families were friends, George's parents were not on par with the Bishops. Her family's baronetcy went back to 1620, whereas the Peachel baronetcy only went 20 years. According to Bowman, the torrent of fresh titles diluted their individual value, and holders of older titles looked down on them from a great height. Katherine, in her letters to her mother, talks about not just meeting royalty at entertainment nights, like the concert that Anne attends in Bath with her family, where they were so adamant about seeing Lady Dalrymple, but it seems like Katherine had a level of familiarity between her and Princess Augusta, who Katherine said asked after you. And then she also refers to the king in her letter, who she said called me by my name and asked me how my sister did. So it's clear that Katherine's family were in the very highest of social circles, so it's easy to see how her family were looking for her to be with others who were also as well connected as she was. So I wanted to read a letter from Katherine's sister Harriet to their mother, Lady Zouche, I think that's how you pronounce that, in December 1822. This letter kind of shows the sentiment that the family has around Katherine and George being together. So she says, "My dearest, snuggest." That's the nickname that they've given their mother, which I think is kind of cute. "My dearest, snuggest, I write to you in a separate cover, having sent another to Kate, and I am desirous this should be for you. I am truly grieved to see you uncomfortable under any circumstances, and can readily enter into all you feel now about our dear Kate. I promise you very easily not to encourage her in thinking you or I could ever agree to her throwing herself away in a bad match, in this or in any other case." Peter James Bowman draws comparisons from Katherine and Anne's personalities. Like Anne, Katherine's family had financial woes, which could have been another reason why they were against the two of them being together. Like Anne, Katherine has an elegant and cultivated mind. She's a keen reader. She discusses important literary works of the day. They both read for consolation and distraction, as well as for mental improvement. They both suffered with lowness of spirits at times. Both are musical. Both can read Italian. Both admire Lord Byron. And both have to abandon their childhood homes for the financial misdoings of their fathers. For Wentworth's part, he is also like George Peachel. Both are younger brothers in gentry families, so they have to have a profession like the Navy to earn their keep. Both are known to be good-looking men. Both are steadfast naval officers. They're sympathetic and graceful and romantically inclined. Like Wentworth's famous letter to Anne, George writes to Katherine these romantic letters, making his feelings known to her. There are also letters back and forth from George and Katherine's sister Harriet, where he's asking advice on how he can marry her. He tells her, "I'm in love with your sister," and then she replies, "It ain't happening."
George Peachel to Harriet, Stratford Place, late May 1817. My dear Mrs. Curzon, as I can never forget the kindness displayed on your part on my most unfortunate case, so under that impression do I ask you to give me your advice as to my future conduct towards your dear sister. I am willing to be guided by your known good opinion, and if it is your wish as well as her own that I should retire from the world, I will add to that sacrifice to which I challenge the world to find a parallel. I have thought that when we meet abroad it is disadvantageous to us both to appear as if a quarrel had taken place. I am myself of the opinion that we should be upon friendly terms, as the extraordinary difference that appeared last night only gives the world more reason to talk us over. It will be my most anxious desire to do all that is honourable by dear Katherine, but it is not to be expected that I can forget what has passed. Yet in my conversations I will studiously avoid touching upon any subject that may relate to our truly distressing situation, as perhaps this is the last time of my giving you any concern by raking up unpleasant sensations, so if you think it proper to show this to Katherine, it may be consoling to her to reflect that whatever I do, I trust she will consider that I endeavour to act for the best. I think I need not add that I feel the highest respect for you and yours, and that you will believe me. Ever yours and most sincerely and obliged, George R. Peachel.
So it's really fascinating to read these and also heartbreaking as well. I think they contemplated running away, but decided not to go against her parents' wishes, and instead he waited patiently for a promotion. They were only able to marry 11 years after beginning their courtship, when his father died, and then he inherited enough money to satisfy her parents. True love isn't dead. So this is a letter from Katherine to her mother, June 5th, 1822. In answer to your dear little note, my dearest snuggest, I can only lament how little you really know and appreciate my dear George's honest and honorable feelings. He is the last man in the world that would attempt to engage me in any promises for the future. He thinks only of my comfort and happiness, and there is nothing he would not do in any way to promote it. At all events, my dear snuggest, if you will not know him, you may trust me. And though he has never urged me to wait for him, it may be a satisfaction to you to know that he said these words to me: "You have never allowed me to look forward." I was very glad to hear I had been so good, considering how very much I should prefer him to any other man I ever saw. But pray, be easy. It is indeed all over, and I hope you will not deny me the only consolation now left me, that of seeing you easy and satisfied with me. I can say no more or do anything further. So what's clear from this letter is, despite Katherine's family's objections to her marriage to George, once he got that promotion, she was like, please just be happy for me. This letter is the historical equivalent of the modern bride going to her mother and being like, I know you're not crazy about him. I know he doesn't make enough money or he doesn't live up to your expectations, but please be happy for me. What this book can provide that Austen did not was how her heroine fared after marriage. Happy to say that in the case of Katherine and George, their 11-year courtship, I still cannot believe 11-year courtship, paid off because they had a happy marriage. They went to dinners and balls, hunting parties, regatta races, castle visits, all the fun things that we envision Regency people doing. The irony of Katherine's family being so worried about her marrying someone like George, who was beneath her in society at the time, was that Katherine's sister Harriet married someone who was more ideal. He had the title and the money that her parents were looking for. However, her sister had a tumultuous marriage. Despite the titles and influence in society at the time, Harriet and her husband struggled with money throughout their marriage. Harriet's husband was terrible at managing their estate, and eventually they had to sell their ancestral seat in a similar vein to Anne Eliot's father, who had to sell Kellynch Hall. This was proof that aristocracy did not always equal wealth and prosperity at the time, and it certainly didn't guarantee happiness in a marriage. I don't want to tell you their entire story about life after marriage. Please do go check out the book. I will link it in my description below. The Real Persuasion, Portrait of a Real-Life Jane Austen Heroine by Peter James Bowman. Again, he's also got some really interesting Regency-related books. I am planning on getting the First Celebrities, 5 Regency Portraits, and The Fortune Hunter, a German prince in Regency England, which could be a really interesting read, especially with the references to a German prince in Bridgerton, I believe. So I'll link those books as well if you'd like to check them out. If you liked what you watched today, we're a new channel. Followers and likes are the best way to help us grow, make more history content, historical fiction, peer drama content. So please do like or comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching. If you had to wait for 11 years to be with me, would you wait 11 years? If we had an 11-year courtship, would you wait for me?
Yeah, but why?
We can't be together. We're in Regency times.
Oh.
Would you wait for me? That took too long.
Yes, but I'm confused as to what would make us wait 11 years.
Our families! We're torn apart. My family says no because my family has money and yours doesn't. Would you wait for me?
Honestly, I'm just getting flashbacks to like our actual engagement. Yeah, I mean, of course, why not? I don't. It seems like a silly question.
I'm not convinced. No one's convinced.
Uh-huh.